even though we have different students sitting in our classrooms, we still see the same types of students in our classrooms. So that's why it helps us to talk about this data and problem solve some things that could help us all in our instruction. So the first question asked if the mean or the median for your class was above or below the typical norm score for the grade level. What did you guys have? What did you find?
Above. Mine was above as well.
For the mean,
Mm-hmm.
mine was above.
Okay. Was the median above for everybody too?
Yes.
Yes, but I found something interesting in mine, is that the mean and the median was a good 6 points.
Okay, so what do you feel like that tells you?
That tells me that my bottom half, which is accurate, is they scored considerably lower than the median.
Interesting.
And so that dropped the mean of my class.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So then as we get to the standard deviation too, I think that shows up in yours also.
Right, right.
Okay. So thinking about that second question asks how it might impact the instruction in your classroom. Knowing what you know, that most of you said you were above, what does that tell you about proceeding through with your class?
Mine is significant. The norm was 210 and mine were both in the 218 range. And I would say I know with that class that I can challenge them a little bit more and go at a faster pace than I can some of my other classes.
Okay.
Because I only have like 1 or 2 students that are below average. And so I tend to be able to, support those two, and I'm able to challenge and work at a faster pace with that first period class than I can in my other classes. It shows with the data too, it matches what I'm seeing.
Yes. It's like that affirmation
Yeah.
that you get, like,
Yeah.
oh, my gut was right about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I chose the class that I had more special needs kids. However, the level of ability for my special needs kids is much lower. And so I find that this class, Abby and our classes were opposite. So my 4th period class is very much like her 1st period. This class I have to slow down considerably, and like Pete and repeat, we're sitting on the fence. That's me for this class. So
Let's come back to that when we get a little bit later, because I think, remind us when we start talking about the higher end, let's come back to that point too, about the Pete and repeat. And have any of your students, number 4, have any of your students scored below the 10th percentile? And what instructional strategies will be most effective with these students? Do we all have students under?
I do not in this particular class.
I had 6, but mine was the lowest class, and I co-teach during that period, so we would do more like scaffolding in small groups.
Okay.
And that's something I was thinking about that I could do with, we're about to read 2 different types of novels in that class.
Okay, and are your novels, are students, I think I remember somebody saying something about,
We're picking them based on data.
Yeah.
okay.
And one, Hills is a lower Lexile
Yeah.
and Washington is.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna bring you to the word scaffolding again, because I think that's a word that, I know I throw it out a lot, but then what do you, give me an example, a specific example of how you might scaffold your 10th percentile and below students versus your whole classroom.
I think it just depends. Like for the lowest, it depends on where they're at that time. I think if it's a higher level question, then I think it'd have to be, compared to my regular kids, have to be a different type of question.
Okay.
So say I have a, analyze this or create this to my regular kids, and then I would say, give me an example of this, and then try to challenge them as they keep on reading throughout the book.
So more
Does that
like
make
a
sense?
stair stepping sort
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
Like first look at this part, and then we'll take you to the analysis, but you need to do this part first.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I think it just depends where they're at, because,
Right.
as the year progresses, they progress.
I think with scaffolding too, you could also give, I'm just thinking with a novel, where you could give them a synopsis of the book, here's an excerpt from the book that kind of gives you a overarching idea,
Yeah.
and then, okay, now we're gonna tackle the novel or pre-teaching that vocabulary. You might do that for everybody, but that's scaffolding of where I'm gonna pre-teach this vocabulary, kind of set it up for you, and then we can go in and attack it. But in this particular class, I don't have any under the 10th percentile, but I definitely do in other classes, and I just, especially with like polls, even maybe watching the movie first, and so they have an overall idea of what it's about, and then being like, okay, now I can actually,
Attach my new
Yeah.
learning to it.
Yeah.
I think it's utilizing the extra staff that you have as well. I mean, most of the kids that are below the 10 percentile are students that have special learning
Yeah.
disabilities. So maybe doubling up on that BSD time where you're reviewing the reading, you're talking more about the reading, where it's more done collaboratively as opposed to an independent read. Maybe having some guiding questions that they're looking for as they read that then that's where you go into your higher level because they have that good basic foundation of what's going on. So I think it's everything that we're
Right.
saying.
because everyone, it's, like for me, on my team, it's the EL kids that are
Right.
below the 10th percentile.
Right.
I have that support too, you know.
And we support each other too with our
Yeah.
ideas.
Well, and that's what I was just thinking about. Your PLC is such a good functioning PLC, and as you move forward, maybe that's a goal that you guys set for your PLC is as we're working through holes, it sounds like you'll have students that need more support in holes. What are some things that we can do to support those questions or those students? So I have like this high level question. I still want all my kids to be able to do it. As a PLC, you guys could discuss what would be some stair-step questions to get them to that question.
Where do we want them to be? And
Yeah.
then work backwards so that
Yeah.
we can help them out.
Yeah, that'd be a great goal for you guys to develop, to work on as you go through Spirit Fingers. All right, so today our goal is to take a look at your classroom data from your class report and think about what instructionally you can do to meet your students where they are. So we're going to use the Interpreting Your Teacher class report document that will help us through looking at that data. So for right now, you already have the class that you're working on. Go ahead and work through those questions that are on that page. And then when we're all done, we'll share out some of the things that we've written down because we'll see, I think, some commonalities between our classes. Starting with number 1, the first question is asking, is the mean or median for your class above or below the typical norm score for the grade level? So what did you guys find with your class?
Both are above.
Yeah.
So you asked, how might this impact instruction in your classroom? Thinking
Is that
about,
just the above or below part, or is that?
yes, yeah.
Oh.
So what you
okay.
answer with number 1, how's that going to impact how you instruct your kids in that
He's on
class?
Median 224. So when you're saying that, so if I'm significantly higher than the average, I should be teaching the class at a higher level, is that what you're
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah, yeah.
What's significantly higher?
Well,
Well,
like I'm a
that's a good
222 versus a 231 is the average norm, the norm is a 222, my class means a 231, which I would say is pretty
Mhm.
much higher.
Whereas mine is
Versus my
only
period 2,
3
which
points above, so I would say that I'm
kind of on it.
maintaining.
Right.
that.
Here's what confuses me though, is out of all of our classes, only one is below.
I didn't check my other 2. I think,
If you look at more than one class, only one of our classes.
Okay, so, but what does that tell you, like that second question, how might this impact instruction? What does that tell you as your class as a whole, what does that tell you?
You should be able to challenge them.
Right.
Okay,
unless, like, I'm just slightly above, so I would be considered more on grade level.
okay.
And I would also wonder if that average is included with, is East included in that as a grade
That
level?
norm, what is that?
Not the norm, the normative data is,
Just our school.
national. Have any of your students scored below the 10th percentile? What instructional strategies will be most effective with these students? Did you all have somebody below?
Yes.
Yes.
Actually, in that class I did not.
Okay.
I don't, but I would person that is closest, is working with Dallas.
Okay, so outside
It's extra
tutor.
help, study hall and things like that.
Alright.
I had two, one of them completed the test in less than 20 minutes. So just in general, lack of attention to what the questions were actually asking. And then the other student has recently been through an entire diagnosis. So he's now receiving one-on-one assistance and extra help, and
Okay,
so kind of an extreme case to the entire 7th grade
Right.
as well. So
what about you, Emily, did you say?
I have one. I think it's probably a combination of effort and time spent on it. However, he's in BSD, and I don't know what his other, he probably could do Dallas tutoring too.
Okay.
Do Lily.
Let's think about as a group for a second, inside your classroom, like all of those things are great, Dallas and BSD and maybe math lab, or, you know, extreme circumstances where a kid's receiving more support through special ed services. What are things that you could do within your classroom to support that, because we all have them.
Something I do with her is I usually, after we've gone through the material, maybe if we have time to start the assignment, is I try to check back with her after a couple questions and make sure she's really getting it. And then if we run out of time, then I have her come during SLT, because she's actually in my SLT, and we sit and we kind of revamp the lesson if it's not clear. But I try to do more checkpoints with her,
Great.
you know, and kind of get to her and make sure she really is on it and not just kind of acting like we're on it.
Right.
Because it's a timid kid, so they not want to speak up in the class anyway.
And she said yes.
I do, what comes to mind is when we did fractions earlier in the year, there was one assignment that some kids did fantastic on and some kids were extremely low on. So the next day we just went back over it, and the kids that did great on it did like this puzzle in pairs. And then I worked with a small group of like 5 or 6 kids that struggled on it, and we went over the whole thing, and it helped. So I would do that with this student, she was in that group.
And if you drill down further into this data where you have the, the learning continuum, where you have the columns of students. And so that might help you with some of your grouping
Right.
too, depending on what skills it is that you need to be, or that you're teaching that day. Okay, let's go on to number 5. Have any of your students scored at the 95th percentile or above? Did anybody have that?
So I had one that was in the 97th percentile, and he was actually one that the conversation was had about whether or not a move to a Bridges math class at this point in the year was appropriate. And due to the curriculum, we decided to have him stay, but he's one that he participates in the math club after school, and he's one that he is willing to do, he loves to do more. So he's the kid that doing the 10 marks kind of on your own early finishers work, he's the one that's kind of going ahead of everyone else. So whereas some kids might only do 2 or 3 assignments, he might do 10. He loves kind of challenging himself, so he's excelled doing that